All right, good evening, everyone. Today is March 30th, 2026. We are going to be wrapping up our weekly series on the Lenten readings. It's been a wonderful series thus far. I hope everyone has enjoyed it as much as I have. Today, we're going to turn our attention to the final portion of Lent, which brings us into Holy Week, which will be Palm Sunday. So go ahead, Sam, and lead us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Today we will contemplate in the Palm Sunday reading. Um, and just a quick overview about the Palm Sunday. First, this will be one of the very few occasions in the church that we will read four Gospels in the liturgy. So we read in Palm Sunday four Gospels, and from the Good Friday Eve till the end of Friday, we'll also continue to read four Gospels in each prayer. And I think the four Gospels reading is a good way to have a complete and a multidimensional view of an event, given how important the event is. So we get the three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke dimensions, and also we take Saint John, who will provide more insight about the event of Palm Sunday. From historical perspective and from a prophetic perspective, Palm Sunday, when Christ entered Jerusalem, this was concordant with the time when the Jews start to have the lamb, the Passover lamb, because this was the 10th of the month of Nisan, where the Passover lamb is being prepared and kept till the 14th day of Nisan, where the Passover sacrifice will be performed. As we see in Exodus 12, 3, 6, we see the commandment says, on the 10th of this month, they are each one to take a lamb for themselves, meaning the Jews or the Hebrews, according to the father's households, a lamb for each household. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at the twilight of the 14th of Nisan. So if we can guess, if you guys get out and looked at the moon, we have a full moon now, and the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, and it's not a surprise that the day before yesterday, on Saturday, it was actually the 10th of Nisan, since the Passover celebration start now, and we usually celebrate in the week following their celebration of the Passover, and this is what make our Easter or resurrection feast changeable in the calendar because it does not follow our solar calendar. However, to understand the Palm Sunday, I wanted to just take us a little bit to look at the whole Lent, because the readings on that day at the surface, some looks concordant, like going together, and some looks like what is the relation, especially if we look at the Abraxas. Um, so if we look at the Lent, there is a key theme in the Holy Lent from the beginning till the end. And this theme is being emphasized every single Sunday readings. So we start in the first Saturday of the Lent. Usually the weekend readings in the Lent are the core message of the week. Monday to Friday preparations, and the core message come on Saturday and Sunday. For the first week, as we heard in the beginning of the Lent, it is mainly the Sermon on the Mount. And on Saturday, the Gospel, in the Gospel, Christ conclude the first portion of the Sermon of the Mount after he talked about the contrast between the Jewish law and the law he is founding, the new covenant. Christ conclude by saying, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." And This word perfect, it is not just a moral superiority or a moral high ground. There definitely meant it, Christ definitely meant something more deeper than that. Um, if we jump to the third point in Good Friday, which is the end of the Lent journey, at the ninth hour, we hear Christ in the Gospel of John, which is the last gospel on the ninth hour, on the cross says, when he had received the drink, the vinegar, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. But the word finished and the word perfect, as we saw in the beginning, they actually have the same Greek word and the same Greek root, which is telos, means goal, fulfillment, wholeness, and completion. And we take this word and we keep repeating it every Sunday from the beginning of the Lent till the Good Friday, no, till the Friday before the conclusion of the Lent. And we give ourselves an exception to start the Lent on Monday, the first day of the Lent, to say the same hymn, the hymn called Migalo, which is a hymn talking about Christ as a high priest, but also his incarnation and salvific work, the works of salvation that he did for us. In that hymn, we say in English, according to the order of Melchizedek, perfect, holy, mighty. And in Coptic, we use the same word, teleos also. Katatin taksin to Melchizedek, teleos, agios yesheros. So there is some sort of a repetition of or a hint to that word, as if the Holy Lent is a journey to achieve a certain goal or to fulfill some state of completion. And Christ is lead on that journey. Um, to understand it more deeply, the word was, as we always use the Greek philosophers' expressions, and we baptize it to use it to explain Christian facts and realities. So this word actually was used in the past by Greek philosophers, mainly Aristotle, and he used it to explain the nature and to explain the purpose of things and the ultimate intended outcomes of things. So he used two examples. He used the first example is the acorn seed. Its purpose is to grow to become an oak tree. And he used that word telos. So the telos of the acorn seed is to become an oak tree. And the same thing he used it at the stone. So he mentioned that the stone is the intended outcome. The telos of a stone is to be shaped into a statue by the hand of a sculptor. So if we went back and we looked at this word in the context of the Bible and the liturgy, the hymns that we say, and Good Friday throughout the Lent, it appears that be perfect is to strive to achieve a certain perfection, a state of wholeness, a state of completeness that we are looking forward to it at the beginning of the Lent was Christ's commandment to us. And this state is achieved in the person of Christ on the cross at the end of the Lent and on the Good Friday. And because we understand that we will not be able to achieve that state of completion, that state of wholeness on our own, so we keep remind ourselves throughout the Lent that we know that you are the only perfect one, the only one who is teleos, the perfect one. And interesting enough, this hymn, the Megalo hymn, is a transitional hymn, meaning the first part of it have a Lenten tune, but the end of it have a Holy Week tune. As it drag our attention throughout the Lent that it is the beginning of a journey of perfection and completion. And this is exactly what St. Paul will use the same word in his epistles to explain the things that we just talked about. That Christ is the telos, the end, the ultimate completeness of the law for righteousness to everyone that is believe. And also, he will use it also in the Hebrew, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter, so of our faith. So if we would like to go back to Good Friday in the ninth hour, and we read what Christ said on the cross, we can with confidence say it has been perfected or it is perfected. But what was perfected? And this is what will bring us to the Palm Sunday readings. So the readings on Palm Sunday, the Pauline epistle, the Catholic, the Praxis, they all talking about that theme. The Pauline epistle talking about the purpose of Christ's entrance to Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He gave us the ultimate telos. He gave us the story of the acorn seed and the ultimate oak tree, the stone and the statue by the hand of the sculptor. So the Pauline epistle, which is one of the very detailed chapters in Hebrew, in the epistle to Hebrews, talking about the salvation of Christ and the consequences of Christ's salvation and the mechanism of Christ's salvation. So there is, well, if we focus on four main points on the in the epistle, we will find that the first point that start the epistle with is Christ is the sacrifice, no one else. He's the only and the single sacrifice. In this Pauline epistle, if we read it from the beginning and toward the end, St. Paul making a comparison between the Old Testament priesthood and sacrifices, which was incomplete, imperfect, and compares them to the complete, the whole, the perfect sacrifice. So you can see the theme of the whole Lent culminate to the ultimate meaning, like that. I don't want to use the word grand finale, but rather it is just the complete revelation of why Christ is here, why Christ incarnate, why Christ baptized, why he made all of the miracles. It is for that day. So he is identifying the sacrifice, as we see in the Hebrew chapter 9, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. It also, in the Pauline epistle, it provide the reason for him offering himself as a sacrifice for the sake of restoration, restoring humanity to the likeness of God that it was created initially for. Let us create man in our image and in our likeness. So we see that how much more than we will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciousness from acts that lead to death. The third point in the epistle, in the Pauline epistle, it also identifies Christ as the mediator, the high priest, in comparison to the imperfect, incomplete high priest of the Old Testament, who had to offer sacrifices on behalf of himself and on behalf of the people. Christ is identified as the mediator of the new covenant, that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. And what is the consequence of Christ being the high priest, offering himself, the sacrifice, and restoring us is the reconciliation that he achieved for us with God. And we find this in the 4 point, he entered heaven itself now to appear for us in God's presence. So the incomplete, the imperfect humanity, the dire situations that we find ourselves in the beginning, we find ourselves now able to achieve the perfection, the wholeness, the completeness in the person of Christ, in God's presence. So reconciliation, restoration through offering himself as a sacrifice, being the high priest. And what are the manifestations in our life if we realized and accepted that salvation, the restoration and reconciliation in our own life? The answers on this, we see it in the Catholic epistle. So the Catholic epistle give us what our life will transform to be once we accept and realize that salvation that Christ offered on Palm Sunday. So if we focus on three main points, and from the epistle to, the first epistle to of Saint Peter, it says, as a result, they do not live the rest of their eternal earthly lives for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. And Saint Paul, in different epistles, use the same theme. For the living don't live the rest of the life for themselves, but for him who died for them and was risen. The second is the love. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. A perfect type of love, a love that was never be achieved without the perfect sacrifice of Christ. And the third thing is the service for everyone. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So, a life for God, a love that transcends any type of human or materialistic love, and a service for all, regardless of their background or their attitudes toward us. So, we move now to the praxis, which is the act. And the praxis is taking a whole different story throughout the land. So the praxis is taking that theme of achieving the perfection, the completeness, and giving us a story, a role model that we can follow. And by following him, we can see how the works of salvation in the life of St. Paul have helped him to achieve his ultimate completeness, his telos, his perfection. We start the first Sunday of the Lent with Act 21st, and literally every Sunday we are going in the last 8 chapters of the book of Acts. And what are these last 8 chapters of the book of Acts talking about? It's talking about St. Paul's last journey, ending with his martyrdom, which is not mentioned in the book of Acts, but was his last prison in Rome. So it starts with the end of his third missionary journey and the beginning of his final journey to Rome, where he will be put into house arrest for 2 years and eventually will be martyred. The same theme, we find it in the morning in the Matins of the Palm Sunday, when we do the procession of the cross in the Matins. In the procession of the cross, we do it in the Matins, we proceed in the church in the shape of the cross, and also we stop in front of many icons of the saints of the church and we read almost 12 Gospels. We stop in front of Saint Mary, Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, Saint Mark, the apostles, one of the saints, one of the martyrs in front of the baptism. And if we looked at what is the common factor that combine all of those saints together, is that they are all different images of perfection, and they were never able to achieve it except through the sacrificial acts that Christ did, starting entering to Jerusalem, ending with the cross, and ultimately the resurrection. And when we see them, we can see the echoes of St. Paul words when he say, "For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son." So they are all images of Christ as firstborn, and they are all different images of his perfection. And this perfection and this salvation is achieved through the baptism. We see the different gospels during the procession of the cross talking about something about related to the life of each one of those saints. And taking that theme now, if we spread it back to the whole length, it is all the story of restoration and reconciliation, starting from leaving the earthly attachments, victory in spiritual warfare on second Sunday, restoring the lost, the prodigal son, and the Eucharistic celebration and feasting on the fattened calf. And then from the fourth to the sixth Sunday, it is restoration examples of different stages of sin and weaknesses. Ultimately, in the seventh Sunday, the beginning of we start to go into a day-to-day life with Christ in the journey of the cross at the Palm Sunday. And interestingly enough, Christ himself will give the same example of a seed growing into a tree on Sunday night, which is Monday evening, in the Pascha prayers, in the first hour of the Monday Eve. He will use the same example. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seed. And this was the goal and purpose of Christ on the Palm Sunday. And with that reconciliation and restoration, we will start the Holy Week, start the readings, reminding ourselves with first fall and the inability to reconcile with God after the fall and after the dwelling of sin in us, and it end with the reappearance of the tree of life that we will read it on the joyous Saturday in Revelation when we read the book of Revelation. However, one thing before we finish, um, something that very striking in the Gospel of Palm Sunday, we see, which is the first Gospel, in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21st, we read when Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" Apparently, Christ's entrance to Jerusalem was not only a controversial and will start the or accelerate the speed of the events which will end up with his crucifixion. But even people who welcomed him or walked with him had different ideas about who Christ is. And this is very important because we will find that in the Gospel of John, the fourth Gospel that we read in the same liturgy, will give us also more insight about how not many people had the same vision of Christ entering Jerusalem. We see different groups. We see the crowd that walked with him and entered with him to Jerusalem. When answering that question and saying, the crowd answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." So they sought for him as a liberator. For the Pharisees, this is what we read in the Gospel of the same liturgy, mentioned in St. John with a different dimension, giving us that they actually thought about it as a political challenge. As we read, so the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him." And then for Herod, it's not read in the liturgy, but we can see that from Saint Peter answer to Christ when he asked who the people think I am on Sunday night. He will give him the answer that Herod think. But when Herod heard this, he said, "John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead." He's thinking about him as the vengeance for his sins and wicked deeds because of what he did with John the Baptist. In the Gospel, the fourth Gospel, that also we read the same Gospel of St. John, we read that some rulers actually believed in him, but could not come out and confess him because of the Pharisees. They didn't confess him, lest they should be put out of the synagogue. They feared the loss of status. Even the disciples. At first, the disciples, we can, following St. John Gospel, the disciples themselves did not understand him, even despite what they see throughout the 3 years. We see that very evident through the events of the Holy Week. So they were walking with him, they were cheering with him, but there are still some confusion still lurking in their mind about who Christ is. And they will always know him when he is perfected when he say when he's perfected on the cross and eventually with his resurrection when he start to tell them about all the events that happened before his crucifixion and explain the correlation between the new covenant and the old covenant. So now this is what I believe I will feel when I read the gospel. I start to ask myself, who is Christ for me? I know one of these images are very provocative, but I believe that sometimes I think about Christ as the healer from my illness, or as the achiever of my dreams, or as the source of my fame, or if there is any circle of influence or power. I feel like he's the mediator of all of this. But Christ never wanted to identify himself as that. When he identify himself as Christ the crucified. And even the apostles who followed Christ and Saint Paul did not identify Christ except with him and him crucified, as he mentioned in First Corinthians. So Christ fulfillment and goal from Palm Sunday to wrap up was the cross. Unfortunately, many people walking with him didn't know that this was his telos or his goal and fulfillment. And he only reveals himself through the cross. And only through the cross we truly know him. And with that, we will hear him on Friday, on Good Friday, when he say it has been perfected. He's talking about our humanity is perfected through his sacrificial act and through his restoration and reconciliation. And with that, I would like to open for us to discuss together. Glory be to God forever. Amen.
Thank you, Sam. I've always had a little bit of difficulty every year when we get to Holy Week and we start with Palm Sunday. Uh, I I don't know how to verbalize this. I would struggle to really grasp the true meaning of the feast because it's Christ coming into Jerusalem and the crowds, they welcome him as the king, and then it very immediately becomes this, okay, chalas, like we go through it and now let's focus on the rest of Holy Week. And it's always acts like we relate Palm Sunday to what the crowds then did to him on Good Friday, right? That's what you always hear. It's like, oh, the people welcomed him as king on Sunday, and then they crucified him on. They asked for his crucifixion on Good Friday, and we always kind of relate it to that. And I almost feel like we don't really take an opportunity to discuss the true meaning and the impact of the feast, and I don't even really fully grasp it. But I appreciated how you related it to the telos, right? Like it's part of almost like a funneling of warp speed through it. It starts this process of, okay, we are now approaching the final fulfillment of what it is that Christ has come and was incarnate to achieve. I'm curious your thoughts because you mentioned this idea of perfection. Do you feel that this is a perfection that is reached here? So, while we're here on earth, or is this a perfection that we reach once we enter into the kingdom of heaven?
Um, you mean on us? Like as for us participating with Christ's salvation that He gave to us, a restoration and reconciliation process. You mean on
Yeah.
us? Yeah, I think we started here, and I think we started here to be complete, and it will never end because this is an ongoing process. It is a symbol. When Saint Paul even tried to explain it, he said, "For you to realize," and then he stopped. what is the highest, what is the width, what is the depth, and like it's definitely start here, and we partake from it, especially when with all the church sacraments, especially the Eucharist, when we become part of Him and He is part of us. But it is never completed here. I will leave it for the others. If anybody have a different opinion.
Well, Mark, if you remember your talk in servant meeting about, or your question, uh, does Christ need our service, and the debates that we had about it? And like it came to my mind, like the only times that Christ said, I am in need of something is when he was in need of the donkeys,
Mm.
uh, or the mole or whatever. So I was thinking about this feast is like, the in order for us to reach this perfection or to participate in the glory of the crucified Christ, we need to consider ourselves as donkeys. God wants us as donkeys to come and help in his ministry. But if we humble ourselves to the level of a donkey, we humble our old nature, we give an opportunity to our new creation to be glorified like God. So one nature is like a donkey, and the other nature is sitting like sons of God by adoption. And this process is a process of perfection, which will start, grow, and um, shine in this world and be completed in the age to come. What do you think?
Mark, did that answer your question? Did we lose
Yeah, I
Mark?
would say I I would say so. I think the angle I was asking it from, you mentioned how Saint Paul is an example of someone who reached that perfection, and so I was curious: is there and when Christ says be perfect, is that a command for us to reach some level of perfection that we actually can achieve here? Because this is the first time I've ever heard, and I loved it. This idea that perfection is it's a telos. It's not necessarily perfection as we think it, but it's just a fulfillment. So just curious your thoughts. But anyway, to answer Mina's question, yes, to some extent, it did answer.
Right. I just want to make more clarification. Sample, we don't consider him receiving the full perfection before his martyrdom. He achieved it by his martyrdom, and that's why he even mentioned this. So he did not like become fully perfect, except this was completed by his martyrdom.
Yeah, same as Ignatius of Antioch. Um, I'm going to Rome to become human. So that perfection in the martyrdom, perfection in becoming like Christ, in salvation. And yeah, that caught my ear also when you were talking, Sam, about the different readings and then the procession. I didn't follow that specific part about what you had said about like, oh, these are the people that were perfected. I think you mentioned Saint Mary, the archangels. Can you elaborate more on that a little bit? Because I think that's maybe where Mark um, heard that piece of like perfected on earth, and that might have been a little confusing.
Yeah, so they are examples. So we call this the procession of the cross because the cross was the way for them to achieve the perfection that God wanted for each one of us. The question that always come is, what about the archangels? They are not humans, they are not people, and the cross really didn't need the cross for salvation, but they were the servants of the cross. And we identify Saint Michael as the preacher of the resurrection when we even pray in our church. So definitely the cross with its effects on the saints that we celebrate in the morning of Palm Sunday transform them to different images of Christ that all were perfected, starting the perfection journey on earth, and was perfected by the end of their life. As Saint Paul mentioned in Hebrews, look at the end of their life and follow them.
Hmm. Gerald, did you have something? Because you turned your camera on.
I was just eating dinner beforehand. But Sam, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. You talked a little bit about, you were saying, I was chewing too loudly, sorry, but you said something along the lines of like neglect, like Christ neglecting something. I couldn't remember what it was exactly, but I wanted to see if you could touch on that a little bit more. But I might have misheard you. I forget which slide it was on though.
Neglect, not sure. Maybe I
I
misheard
might have misheard it
something.
then. But essentially I would have to see the slides again to jog my memory. But no, that was
Hold
it was
on.
great through and through.
Peter, Yusuf.
Hi, all. Sorry, I just came on.
Oh,
So
are you being abducted?
uh, that was the camera. I'm driving. Yeah.
Um, so
Help! Help. What's the symbol for help? You can't see.
so Marco, I want to come back to something that you said about, that transition between Palm Sunday and, it seems abrupt, I agree. Where like we're celebrating, like festive. It's like the happiest tune of the year, and then funeral prayer, and then Holy Week, and then leading up to crucifixion. And I think the, the the idea that these are separate, and the idea that um, from a hymnological standpoint, it's jarring. I think the first one is an illusion, and the second one is on purpose. So it's an illusion that these are separate things, and it's jarring on purpose for us to go from celebration, ephlogimenos, like, Hosanna, uh, and then all of a sudden, like, mournful. And I love asking this question in Sunday school. I hate to do it here, um, but I think it comes more like as an aha, like, oh, I never thought about that, when it's posed as a question rather than an answer. Um, is there a hymnological answer to that question? Like, is there like an answer that the Coptic Church offers us as to why it's not jarring, and actually Palm Sunday and the cross are like actually like intertwined and connected like this, and it's not by accident? This is a purely hymnological question, and it's a purely hymnological answer that the Coptic Church offers us on the connection between Palm Sunday and the cross.
They have the same tune.
They have the same tune,
Yeah.
right? So the 3 days of the year that have the same tune are Palm Sunday and the two feasts of the cross.
And the weddings.
Yeah. I'm not taking the bait, Sam. No, no,
No
no.
worries.
No, they should change the wedding, and the wedding should just
Recording off. Recording off.
like, okay, from now on, there's no more barbecue. We're giving out pens and pamphlets, and everybody gets flat. Like they're like, we've canceled the men's ministry. Uh, we're all fired. But I
So
think,
the question to me now is the tunes of the hymns of Holy Week are really mournful, are really sad
This is
from
a
a
good
musical
question,
point
Hamza.
of view.
So are you asking my opinion, or are you asking like?
Your opinion, yeah.
I mean, I'd have to. You met my friend Paul. I'd have to go get
Yeah.
Paul. He's he's the music guy. In my and I don't know if anybody else on the call has more musical experience than I do that can answer on behalf of Paul in his absence. But it's a lot of minor notes. It's a lot of uh, very musically slow. Um, I think it's mournful. I don't know. Like, is that a trick question, Sharif?
No, because I don't like for me. So, so going to pass the time, the the song is mournful, but Suktet Igom and Ur are not, are very joyful actually.
I asked, so my wife is a musician also, and she told me one time that I told her, oh, Golgotha is a very sad hymn. She said, no, it is not. It is a major key. It is very royal kind of hymn. The sad one is Ariba Mevi. She told me this is a very sad one. But
Yeah,
Golgotha, if you let somebody not from the Coptic church listen to it, they'll say, wow, joyful hymn. I was shocked.
I
and like
mean,
I'm not talking about Bright Saturday where we know the transition, but like hymns that we sing during the Holy Week. Pekethronos start as melasmatic, like sad, and then turn joyful. Uh, Soktetigom is joyful for me, or like it's a kind of a military tune for me.
yeah.
Uh, Tishori Taishoria of Great Friday, again changing. Ologanith, I don't think it's a sad tune at all, or like Only Begotten Son.
Hmm.
After you start with the first part, like the long tune for the first word, and then you turn into like a joyful tune.
Hmm. I listen. Like I said, I 1000% concede my musical illiteracy. I'm not the person to answer this. Hopefully, there's somebody else here that in addition to Sam, on behalf of his wife, can weigh in on this. I mean, we can leave it as an outstanding question,
Mm.
um, and I don't think it's contradictory to say that some of them are sad and some of them are joyful. Some of them are mournful that transition to joyful. And I think if anything, Sharif, I think it emphasizes the point that the I was talking I forget who I think I was I was talking to Peter Yusuf about this on Sunday. We are the only religion that has the audacity to say that suffering is a good thing. Like everyone else
Yeah.
is trying to escape suffering in some way, right? Like, oh, it's caused by your desires. Get rid of desires and you'll get rid of your suffering. Oh, it's caused by anger from God. If, you please God, then you won't. Oh, it's caused by, something that, you did and, it's karma. Like everybody else, has an explanation for suffering that number one vilifies it and number two gives you theological religious guidance on how to escape it. We're the only religion that goes suffering. Yes, please. Like I will take an extra side of suffering with my suffering. It's like the spam sketch from Monty Python. Like, yes, I love suffering. Like I'm having the suffering, 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 baked beans, suffering, 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 and suffering. Like please give me as much suffering as possible. And it is because, to answer Sam's question, our answer to who Christ is this um, suffering God man that reveals to us what it means to be human, right? Let us create man in our image and likeness. Genesis, it is finished. Gospel of John, Ignatius of Antioch explains, boom, this is my martyrdom. I become human. I become like Christ in my martyrdom. So if we reject suffering, we reject the cross, then we reject the throne, right? So the royal tune, the Palm Sunday tune, is the same as the cross tune and the wedding tune. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah,
I'll never be able to escape that
yeah.
connection.
Let me get from this point, like what we call sad tune is a royal tune, and if we compare our rites to the Greek and the Syrian, for example, the Syrians, the prayers of the Holy Week are called Nahira, or the Enlightenment, or the light. And the first prayer of it is called the prayer of the port, the seaport, where we go, the telos, our end. In the Greeks, the prayers over this week is called the bridegroom, Olympheus. And the colors in the church is actually purple, the royal color rather than black. So if you put like other Orthodox tradition next to our Coptic tradition, we can understand the whole idea of this transition between the most joyful day and the rest of the Holy Week. It's the price of the kingdom. I think so.
So are you saying there is or there isn't? Because I'm trying to unify the two, right? I'm trying to say that the